Hello, Bybee classes. Today we are going to be looking at the causes of the Civil War. Depending on which historian you are reading or listening to, you will get different explanations as to what actually caused the Civil War. For the purposes of this class, I will highlight 6 generally accepted causes. The first one is sectionalism. The North and the South were quite different prior to the Civil War. For one, they had many cultural differences or way of life. For example, the South believed strongly in the institution of slavery and the expansion of it, whereas the North generally believed slavery should stay where it was. Economically, they were also different, with the South primarily being agricultural or farmers, and the North being industrial or factory workers. Both sides believed their way of life was more important. Abolition. Abolition was a social reform movement started by people in the North who wanted to abolish slavery across the country. While not all Northerners believed this was a good idea, nevertheless, the Southerners saw it as an act of aggression against their way of life. This resulted in the growing tension between the North and the South. Slavery in the territories. While many Northerners were against the complete abolition of slavery in the South, there was a general belief that it should not be expanded to new areas. As more states were created, Southerners wanted them to be slavery states, and Northerners did not. How did they get to this point? From 2 prior acts of Congress. The first was the Missouri Compromise, which was passed in 1820. Maine had been created as a non-slave state, at the same time that Missouri was made as a slave state. This, theoretically, kept the balance between slave and non-slave states. In addition, it was agreed that no states admitted above the 36th parallel would be a slave state. Next came the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This law allowed the people in the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to vote in order to decide if they wanted to be a free or a slave state. This essentially repealed the Missouri Compromise and led to increased tension between the North and the South. States' rights. This issue goes back to the writing of the Constitution. The Southern states were fearful that the federal government would gain too much power and limit their rights. Specifically, the South was afraid that the federal government was going to forcibly take away their slaves. They preferred that each individual state had more power than the federal government. On the other side, the North supported the strength of the federal government and were willing to follow its lead. The election of 1860. This was an election between Republican Abraham Lincoln, Democrat John C. Breckinridge, another Democrat Stephen A. Douglas, and a constitutional unionist named John Bell. Lincoln ran on a campaign stating that he was opposed to the expansion of slavery into new territories, but was supportive of leaving it alone where it already was. The Democrats, who were primarily Southerners, supported the right to take slaves into the territories. Southerners feared a loss in this election meant a loss of power by them in the federal government. The final cause was secession. Beginning with South Carolina on December 20th, 1860, 11 Southern states declared their secession from the Union. These states believed the only way to protect their states' rights from the Republican president and the federal government was to break away from the nation. So, the 6 primary causes of the Civil War that we will be working with are sectionalism, abolition, slavery in the territories, states' rights, the election of 1860, and secession. Be sure to bring any questions you have over this material with you to class. See you soon.